Um, and part of what I want to discuss today is just to sort of throw open and kind of problematize whether, in fact, people all want to build connections across teams. There are probably a lot of coaches who really do, and it's just like, oh, I wish I knew who was around and how to get in contact. I think we're getting better at that. On the API IEB site, under the regional competitions, there is a map. And so you can go and find locations for the teams. And a lot of you, if you've brought teams to regionals, you're kind of aware of other coaches in your region already. And with being forced virtual a couple of years ago, I think people are getting used to being able to set up virtual scrimmages and things like that. But I think there's probably a conversation to be had about being intentional with that. We kind of try to loosely do that. Coming out of the workshop 2 years ago, we created sort of a Google Doc where people could just throw their information on a Google Doc, and then you could just, oh, there's the Google Doc. I'm going to reach out to Wayne and see if I can set up a scrimmage. But I don't think a lot of people were making use of it. So I'd love to have that as part of our discussion. So part of it's just logistics. And then the other part of this is sort of a values conversation about, do we want to hold tightly to all our little secrets, or do we want to, the more we share, the better? And I don't think it's just building connections, scrimmages and competitions, but also, hey, what are you doing when you're working with your students? And, so we'll talk about that as well. So Matthew, you're out of the box with a hand up. So let's get right to you.
Yeah, thank you. This is something that we've actually been really trying to emphasize this year, and it's one of our big goals, just like reaching out to other teams. And we think having a community would make all of us kind of a better ethics bowl person, or like competitor, or even just someone that wants to talk about ethics. So our team definitely like agrees that having a community is like very, very important across campuses. And also we're trying to experiment with hosting our own competition, and having those connections makes it so much easier. And I feel like you can learn a lot from like other teams. So like we're kind of the stance where, yeah, of course you don't want to like maybe reveal all your, secrets, but then also, you can grow together and kind of improve and see. And it's also interesting to see and get different perspectives on like the cases from other teams. So.
Yeah. And Matthew, I'm at Harper, so we're about an hour and a half from you. And Chicago is this great area because it has this density. And this is anecdotal, but I know Harper had a lot of competitive success for a while. And I would link it directly to the fact that we had a Chicago area ethics bowl, which is just a scrimmage. It was just the way, and the coaches played the role of judges and moderators. And we did it before the Upper Midwest and the 2-year bowl, so that some of the teams were getting multiple attempts to and just the act of practicing. Youngstown does this internally, right? Their whole coaching methodology is they scrimmage from day one. But to do that with other teams, I think can be exciting. Yeah, Caitlin? Oh, they went somewhere.
Trying to find some buttons. I haven't used Zoom in a while. They use Teams at our university. So I coach a high school ethics bowl team, and we host, well, not my school, but another one of the schools host what we call like an ethics plate every year. And we try to do like quite a few scrimmages with the other high schools. We've even had the high school students do scrimmages with like our college teams, which are really fortunate in Utah in that like we live in this bowl. And so everything's very close proximity. And so that's kind of easy to do in person. But we've even done a few, so like when I have particularly exciting like guest lectures come to teach my kids about something, I've invited other teams there. And so I don't think that there's much of a like competition in that sense, because I mean, everybody's style of ethics bowl is so different, and there's no like collaborating together that's going to like trade secrets, in my opinion. And I think it really fosters a good community. And I think we all agree that some of the best parts of ethics bowl are the community and these like lifelong friends that you end up making and things like that. So we've been working really hard the last couple of years, me and some of the other coaches in Utah, and our collegiate coaches as well on getting our high school students much more involved with other students and the college teams and just being around more. And it's been nice. And I know at my school, we've seen our head count like double in the last couple of years of students that are interested in Ethics Bowl. And so it's been a lot of fun too, to meet when there's not as high of stakes, I guess. Little lower pressure.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about what you just said, Caitlin, is we've heard people talk about the fact that they feel a little, I don't know, uneasy, maybe is even too strong, but that when we get, especially at the national level, they feel like some of that collegiality dissipates a little bit when that real high adrenaline competition takes hold. And when you have the no stakes occasions to interact as teams, it's really tremendous because it can just be really collegial. Benjamin, your hand was hiding. It was blurring and blending into your background there. I didn't notice it, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to mention that since we're in Arkansas, we're relatively isolated from most other schools. So it's kind of the opposite of the Chicago situation. So yeah, I've always been interested in having some kind of way I could connect with people from other parts of the country, and maybe even have teamwork with people from other parts of the country, since we are so far away from most other schools that do Ethics Bowl.
Yeah, I think we can go back to at least doing something pretty basic like the Google Doc with contact information and things like that, because I think the virtual way to do it for if you're more isolated is a nice option. And I think some of you know this, but the Ethics Bowl Council is sort of the voting body of the IEB, and we're meeting tomorrow to finalize some discussions about creating a permanent virtual region. It will the idea is that it only be open if you get shut out of a physical region, or that like travel's impossible because you're coming from Alaska or England or something. But that will also, I think, help create some of these avenues where people get used to continuing to exist in that virtual competitive space too. So yeah, Jenna and Watson.
This is just like one point. It's kind of like the theoretical point, but like I just wanted to adjust like the secrets bit. Is that like I think that yeah, like there are no secrets in like Ethics Bowl, and I think like encouraging like an intercollegiate like collaborative I guess like mentality or spirit will actually like fit very well into like the mission of the Ethics Bowl, and like actually can be another like practical way of distinguishing Ethics Bowl from like other things like MUN or moot court or debate, is that like you can collaborate, and like collaboration with other people with their different perspectives is like highly encouraged. And I think that like speaking from the Chicago experience, I remember that during our, again, like before we got official recognition during like our kind of underdog, like unofficial team year, we did a virtual scrimmage with another school, with Illinois Tech. And they have a completely different speaking style and like way they approach cases than like we did. And like leaving that scrimmage wasn't like, oh, we were worried about them stealing ideas or, you know, us like taking theirs. It was actually like really informative to kind of know like how other people think, and that can actually shape your own perspectives on these issues. So I just wanted to highlight what Caitlin and Matt were saying earlier about like being pro intercollegiate scrimmage and like intercollegiate connections. And I think another thing too, like going back to like, I don't think there are really ways to spill secrets, and that like your approach to the cases can be generalized, but like at the end of the day, the argument that you create is catered to a specific question that you have no idea of like knowing word for word. So like there isn't really a way to like copy other people's answers, because the answer is going to be different anyway, because we don't even know what the question is. So I wouldn't worry too much about like secrets being spilled. And I think that like you can learn from each other's approaches. And again, like being collaborative at an intercollegiate level fits very nicely with like the mission of the Ethics Bowl, and can be a point to distinguish your Ethics Bowl from like other academic teams that might be at your institutions. And I think a practical point too about like, well, how do we, I guess like start that intercollegiate connection if we're like, you know, if we're in places like Arkansas or like kind of a bit more isolated, is to like, yeah, like having that virtual space is very important. I think John, would be a good idea to kind of like have that, definitely have like a Google Doc or like some kind of contact sheet where people can like start virtual competitions, because from personal experience, like you don't really lose that much in terms of like concepts and sharing ideas from a virtual space versus an in-person space. Like you can get just as much out of it from competing virtually. And actually, I think it'd be even better because then you can compete with like the schools that are farther from you and get like different ideas. So I'm very, very pro like competing virtually in order to scrimmage. And I think the virtual regional, like having that be like a permanent feature would be like a really good idea.
Yeah, thank you, Jenna. Watson, Larry, I'm going to get to you in 1 sec. I just want to speak to something that's going on in the chat here for a second. So I want to clarify something because the questions were, can you have teams that are composite teams from multiple schools? And the answer is no. So not currently. Currently, the IEB is entirely structured by school. So even, let's say, Larry brings 3 teams from Westchester to a region, and one of those 3 teams qualifies, right? The school has qualified. And at the IEB, that could be 10, you could bring a whole new set of students to the IEB, but the school is the qualifying unit. But it is an interesting issue that it may be that we might decide that it's worth reconsidering whether that's the only unit that we consider. But that's only for formal competitions, right? The qualifying regionals and the IEB. So for scrimmages, this is a great thing that teams could do, or even individual students could do. So you could have an individual student at a school that's interested in the ethics bowl, but the school itself, this sort of goes back to our previous session, the school itself might not have a team yet, and they could try to meet with some students from other schools and do scrimmages, because there's nothing that prohibits any collection of students from doing ethics bowl outside of that, the official structure of feeding into the IEB. So that's just something to keep in mind as we get creative about trying to build some of these connections. So go ahead, Watson, and then Larry.
Well, there's a part of me that wonders if this is just a subtle way of me to, express some pride in our team, which is to say, I'd be bragging. But we did rather well for ourselves as a first-year team, and that necessarily means that if teams want to get in touch with us, that could be a fantastic opportunity to echo something Matt had said, to actually have like a Chicago Bowl, which would be sort of informal amongst ourselves, no doubt, but would provide people with opportunities to, of course, exchange ideas, to figure out how other teams think, and perhaps even get better into themselves. Johnny, you had mentioned that it could very well be the case that I could act as my own agent, just go to different schools and reach out to different schools, just for the purposes of scrimmaging and of myself. I also imagine if this is a way for us to extend the reach, we could also act as representatives who can give talks. I mean, this strikes me as a bit self-important, but we'd be doing the work on our own time to express to other schools that have yet to have an ethics bowl what we're doing at another school and why it might work for us. It could potentially be transferred as a model elsewhere in different circumstances. Of course, perhaps this goes a bit theoretical, and we just have to do the messy work of sending emails, sending messages, hoping that we could schedule and establish different meetings between ourselves, and hoping it's but a slow grind. Yeah,
it's great. And Watson, you got me all fired up with some of your ideas here, because I love this idea of like student advocates that are just sort of like, I have a list of people that are sort of ambassadors for the ethics bowl that are going out and doing outreach in addition to some of the competitive things. So that's such a great thought. Yeah, Larry.
Yeah, this is, can you hear me okay? This is really terrific, a terrific conversation. And I'll say one of the things that I use to sell the ethics bowl is that it's a chance for our students at a mid-sized state university to talk about these cases with students from some of the more highly ranked schools in the country that they may even apply to and either not got in or couldn't afford. And so it's great to use it this way. But the reason I raised my hand is I think it's a funny concept to talk about secrets about how you do ethics bowl, because the reason we all got into it, I think, is for the cases, right? To find a way to anything we can do to improve all of our ability to talk about these cases is an advantage. And so I wouldn't be thinking about any secrets or anything. But one other thought that the Chicago people made me think about is that I think we want to be, and we are, the Ethics Bowl is expanding. And I think one of the things we have to think about if it continues to expand is this idea of a school being able to bring multiple teams to a regional competition. And I've done that. Well, I've brought multiple teams, but I think if it gets to a certain size, someone's going to bring multiple teams and some other school's not going to get to participate because you can only have so many schools that are regional, and especially kind of like what Chicago, but maybe even more so where we are in the Northeast. I mean, there's such a density of colleges and universities here that wouldn't be able to travel to any other region. And so we're packed into the Northeast. So maybe that's something we have to think about going forward, is how we're going to manage a growing ethics bowl nationally with more schools, and how we make sure that every school gets in.
Yeah, so Larry, I'll just speak to that for a second. We've been noodling on that a little bit. And we saw some of this with the virtual because a lot of regions were very concerned about being able to support a regional in terms of judges and moderators. So we were seeing lower caps at regions and rules coming in for the first time about like, we will only accept one team per school, or, that kind of thing. And I think that's going to be a major avenue of work for the IEB nationally, structurally, but also for regions. So right now, regions can set their own rules about how they're going to take teams. First 24 are in, or, it has to be used as your qualifier, or, one team per school. We're also talking about, the National High School Ethics Bowl is moving to a super regional format where the regional winners will then go on to a super region before they go to the national. And I don't think that's not on the immediate horizon for the IEB, but it could be on the distant horizon for the IEB, where we really think about rethinking what qualifying looks like, and especially with virtual ability, we'd be able to do that. Hold a virtual super region, right, so to speak. But that, I'm just sort of spitballing when we talk about that. I think the other thing that connects to, that I'd like us to talk about a little bit, one quirk of the Ethics Bowl, very different from speech and debate, right? A lot of practice, very few opportunities to compete. So we've talked a little bit about scrimmage, but I don't know what people's thoughts are about like more year-long programming, more ability to have multiple competitions or events, even if not competitions, spread over the calendar year. And my experience has been, Alex Richardson and I had talked a little bit about doing a student-focused workshop during the year. And by and large, it kind of fell like people were not excited because they're like, I don't know how I would do that. We're busy getting ready for the competition. So we talked about, well, what if we did it in October? Well, nope, we're getting ready. What if we did it in March? Nope. So it's not without its difficulties. But what are people's thoughts about trying to, use the calendar to help build up some of these connections between teams?
I think that more programming we do, provided we can support it, the better. Because as has been mentioned, the organization is growing. And I think giving students the ability to, tangibly touch something every once in a while is a good thing. A parallel I can kind of like think about this is kind of like the NBA. They are now creating an in-season tournament, and I believe next year it's going to be the first year, in addition to their finals at the end of the year. And so I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think the other side of it too, Glenn, is what do you do with all the teams that don't qualify for the IEB? How do you hold on to those people in the spring? And do we want to sort of NIT, to use the basketball at the college level metaphor here, right? You've got the NCAA tournament, but maybe there's the secondary tournament for the non-qualifiers or things like that. So I'm gonna get Jenna and then Benjamin.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Glenn said. Like, I think if we can like support it like financially, just like space wise and everything, like definitely we should totally do this because like you mentioned, John, like there's a I think like when you guys start like ethics bowls, you'll encounter this problem of like how do you not only get interest in the first place, but how do you maintain that interest throughout the school year? Because all the competitions are kind of like kind of put in the front of the year as like in the fall, it's difficult to maintain interest if like throughout winter, if you're not going to Nats or like, especially in spring when it's kind of like a dead season. And there actually might be ways in which Appy can collaborate with other spring competitions. Matt mentioned that we're trying to host our own competition with like writing our own cases and things like that. But I know
Wow.
there's also a bioethics bowl. I forget who officially hosts it. I know like last year is like, I think Oklahoma University, and then this year it's Northeastern. I think what they do is kind of like an intercollegiate bioethics bowl, but it's not affiliated with Appy, but it might be like maybe something that you want to either like collaborate with as an organization. It's just like some resources that we were thinking of, like how to maintain that interest. I think like having more events, having more competitions, or even just, it doesn't have to be like competitions per se, but just like events where ethics bowl students from like different schools can meet each other and share ideas is like super critical, I think, to have throughout the whole year.
Yeah. And I would, Benjamin, 1 second, I'm sorry, but you know, one thing that is attractive about scrimmages as a way to do this is just, if you have any type of formal event, imagine a fairly small event with 12 teams. That's 6 rooms. That's 24 volunteers. So there are some hardships that crop up with just, you know, for those of you who have not seen the organizing that goes into the regional events, so that's actually going to be our next session, but it is a monumental lift to get 40, 50, 60, 70 volunteers to some of these. So we have to be kind of creative about, you know, actually being able to support having several events over the years and thinking about size of those, et cetera. So Benjamin and then Ron.
Well, you mostly covered what I was going to say, but
Oh, sorry.
I was just, no, I just like the idea of having some kind of, you know, thing for teams that don't make it to nationals in the spring. You know, we were talking about that a lot on my team, of having something that we could work on and get excited about and work on the nationals cases. But it was just really hard for us to organize something ourselves. And if there was like some kind of little tournament or, you know, league or something to match up with other teams, even if it's not for anything, but just for the sake of having more ethics bowl, I would be really into that.
Yeah, and what's good, you know, Benjamin was saying, is if we keep that kind of casual, the coaches can double as moderators and judges, and then it becomes a little easier to actually support it organizationally. Yeah, Ron?
One of the things to keep in mind with these kind of extra things, which I love the idea, but at my school and our teams, like 90% of the students work full-time jobs. They do not have the luxury of just taking a weekend here and there. So it becomes very difficult to schedule extra things. We're lucky if we get 3 weekends a year where we can get everybody together. So I'd like to push the virtual angle on this real hard. That's all.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was something Watson said spawned this, but even the idea of individual students being able to connect across schools to do a virtual practice would be kind of fun. So that's great. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you, Ron. And even when we were talking about the pipeline from the National High School Bowl, you know this too. We're at community colleges, and a lot of the high school bowl participants are they're going to high competitive selective schools. They're not coming to Harper College. So there are these things where it's you know, hard to, you know, some of us have these obstacles. Yeah. I thought, Wayne, you had your hand up, but no. Okay. Richard's teasing me during over in the chat here. Oh yeah, Glenn, you and me both. Well, it's, you know, one thing, Glenn, not to move into a different session here, but I do think that's one of the things that's interesting about the ethics bowl in the classroom conversation is how we can find ways to link up the teaching that we're doing with the coaching and programming that we're doing too, because it keeps us, I know, even this workshop gets me excited for the coming year and things like that. And as you all know, right, I think Larry said it, it's the cases that are the heart of the ethics bowl and getting students excited about just discussing this. So any opportunities that we can have to do that is great. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, but we can come back to this if people like. I think we've got some good, nice.
Can I blurt in a bit?
Of course.
I think this idea of doing something this spring is great because that is something, it's funny, I've never sort of thought about operationalizing it like this, but it is something that after we come back from the ethics bowl, it's okay because we don't make it to the nationals, then wait till next fall. And a lot of times I do try to get some students together to sort of look at the national cases and do little practice things. But if we actually had an event of some kind that we could do in the spring, it would sort of, I just think that's a really great innovation if we can make it happen somehow.
Yeah, I think organizationally, the trick there is that I go into a coma after the IUB national championship. So, and the national organizing committee is all, we're just completely drained. And then, I'm 2.5 weeks behind in my grading after that. So we're going to have to build, have other people being part of the process of planning and leading that. Cause, I tease Alex sometimes, right? Because they have he has a salaried position and we are a group of volunteers. And so we have to figure out ways to distribute the work such that it's sustainable for us all, which is important too. Yeah, there you go. That's actually a good point, Alex, is it's a great way to stay involved is volunteering for the national high school bowls. But I know that a lot of students feel like that's awesome, but it's not the same as competing or that kind of thing. But they're not mutually exclusive either, right? People can do both. Okay, so this is what I wanted to shift to is just we had talked a little bit about this throughout the day, and I teased it in the last session. I didn't know if people want to talk a little bit about sort of spreading the bowl, making connections on your own campus, so that part of recruiting, et cetera. And I'll offer one idea here. We actually had a faculty ethics bowl public mock match in the auditorium at Harper, just to get awareness to other faculty of this is a thing that we're doing. And we had also student showcases and things like that. So I don't know if people had ideas of how you've tried to grow the ethics bowl presence on your campuses, or bringing colleagues into the fold, even just using cases. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Catherine in the last session mentioned using bioethics type cases in that discipline. So have at it. Thoughts? Otherwise, you're just going to hear me nervously natter about things. Well, okay. I'm never short on questions. We were having this discussion Rich and I were talking about this a minute ago. I was sort of making the case that if you, thank you so much.
I just had a quick thought. So these scrimmages are probably most feasible if they're online. If it's just like a one-on-one, you could just have a Zoom meeting and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But if there's going to be a whole bunch of teams and like a big organized thing, then it's a bigger deal. And so at my university, University of North Georgia, we've hosted it several years in a row. And so for a couple of years in a row, it was online. But there was IT people, and we had to hire them to just have people going all to different rooms at different times and so forth. If we hired them to do a scrimmage, we'd have to pay them. And so you might have to charge the teams to pay to be part of the scrimmage. I don't know if it's feasible to do it or not, but I might have to pay. But if it's just like one-on-one, you could just have an appointment with two teams.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that does lower some of the barriers. Say that again about paying.
Well, so we had to hire IT people. So every person at each round, they would know who goes to what
Oh.
virtual room and so forth. And they're all sitting there on their tables and everything. And it's just a big organizational thing. So we pay them to do that. They get paid extra. It's not part of their salary.
Okay.
So if we had a scrimmage that had like 20 teams, you'd have to hire all those people and the money would have to come from
Right.
somewhere. So you might have to charge teams an admission fee for the scrimmage.
Yeah. And so my speakers are glitchy, so I didn't hear you say IT, but now I got it. Okay. So,
okay.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that's one thing that's interesting when we think about scrimmage sizing, right? So you could do a scrimmage. The Chicago Bowl is usually 4 or 5 teams that come together and we kind of round robin it, and you get some pizza. It's very casual. I don't know if they've been doing it the last couple of years, but pre-COVID we were doing it. And you could do anything from 12 teams to 4 teams to, as you sort of alluded to, James, that like just 2 teams coming together and you have one Zoom room and nobody has to do anything too complicated to set it up, kind of thing. So it's a good point to bear in mind, just in terms about sizing. Deborah and Mark admitted that they were busy passing notes in class when I was asking the previous question. So I will repeat that question. I was just asking about, and it's actually right right up your alley, Deborah, in terms of connections across campus for Ethics Bowl. So as we know, some of us, or oftentimes Ethics Bowl sort of exists in one person's head on a campus, and they recruit their students and they form a team and that's it. And but there's really great arguments for doing ethics, finding ways to build it as part of ethics across the curriculum programming. And what I was about to say is that Richard and I were having a back and forth earlier about, does it make sense or not make sense to say, hey, we ought to do this as a department. We ought to really try to integrate this. Everyone teaching ethics should do this. I think there's some really compelling reasons. The answer to that question is no. Academic freedom and, maybe Ron's just not into those set of questions and Wayne is, and, that kind of thing. But it's just something I want to throw out there is, what do you all think about whether and how to expand Ethics Bowl outside of an individual coaching or teaching experience? Richard. I can hear you faintly from far away. Do you want to, we're in the physical same space. Do you want to just run over here?
Sorry about that. We're all in one room, so we have to make sure that the microphones are turned off except for the one speaking. Yeah, so I've had a little bit of luck over the years when I coach, getting other faculty members and other students involved in our preparations, and that's sort of nice. So we'll have 1 or 2 teams and they'll be working on their cases and they'll want to present, and so we'll bring in faculty members who are not going to be judging at the competition and otherwise don't have anything to do with the bowl, to serve as judges, right? And this is kind of useful because you get some of the obvious questions, but you also get the not so obvious questions because they're not quite as immersed in it, and that prepares you for the wide variety of questions judges might ask. And then we bring students in and give them sort of a quick primer on how to give a commentary and a response to commentary and all that. And so the teams that are preparing will do their 10-minute presentation. I'll make up a moderator's question, and then the other students will respond to it. We don't hold them to 5 minutes. We just let them sort of throw everything at the team that, based on what they hear. And so this has the advantage of helping the team prepare, but it also has the advantage of getting considerably more people involved in Ethics Bowl. People that might want to do it next semester, the judges come in, might want to help coach down the road, and so forth.
Awesome. Thank you. David?
Well, a colleague I coach with, Ron Loeffler, and we often twist the arms of colleagues across campus, and that's usually pretty well received. But our campus, I think, our university is in the midst of kind of really doubling down on some high impact classroom rhetoric, as well as like service classes and getting out in the community type rhetoric. And as it's sort of revising its strategic plans, I'm wondering if my colleague and I shouldn't propose some kind of high impact course, which might become mandatory in some of our majors, that involves sort of organizing campus and community ethics bowl events. That's a thought that's occurred to me this weekend.
It's
So,
interesting. Ron, you might be able to speak better to this than I am, but I don't know. But Ann Thibault at Santa Fe, who, as many of you know, was an extraordinary coach for Santa Fe for a number of years, but also has just started a Center for Ethics at Santa Fe, which is pretty close to unheard of at a two-year school. Is a really remarkable, but used Ethics Bowl as part of the argument for the Center for Ethics and really try to connect it into public-facing programming. And so I think that's David, there are some initiatives out there. You might, I don't know, Ron, if I could dig out Ann's info, but she might be a good resource for thinking about some of these things, about ways to develop some of these campus-facing or public-facing programming.
Yeah, I know she'd be happy to talk to people about this. I'm a little reluctant to just post her email in the chat. But if you email me, I can forward it to her with no problem at all. Yeah, she's done great work with that. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons she stepped down from coaching the team, is she's got so much going on. But she definitely used the Ethics Bowl as something that people could relate to. You know, they saw video of it, they saw its effect among the students, and she just was able to really say, look, this is a really good thing and we should do more of this. It was compelling, easily enough. So yeah.
Great. And Daniel, to your comment in the chat, I'm gonna fog out on this, but I think it was Bob Ladenson that was doing this work, but he was trying to do some work on quantitatively assessing the impact of participation in the IEB. And I'm sure that Alex has done some of that work. I know that he's done some of that work at the National High School Ethics Bowl. So we'll see what kind of stuff we have and see what kinds of materials we can generate at the national level that any team can use, or any region can use to try to promote it on your own campus, and or if a region's trying to grow. Yeah, we'll try to do some of that. Any other thoughts people have? I think the scrimmage has been the big idea. Scrimmaging in various forms has been the big idea, and I did see some people note in the chat that the Google Doc would be useful. So we will make sure we get that back up. It's pretty, it's a Google Doc. It's going to be pretty rudimentary, but we can get some announcements out about it so people are aware that it's there. And then, it'll be editable, right? So you can just go and reach out to, put your info right into the Google Doc and then access it and reach out to people to set up any kind of scrimmage that you want. And then Alex and I will renew our conversation about some sort of spring-based event. And one thing that's nice about a spring-based event, but not necessarily a tournament, is that it takes a little less. You don't need 50 volunteers to do it, but we can maybe run a smaller set of scrimmages as part of a workshop type of opportunity, do some impromptu types of things. I kind of like this idea of doing high school versus IEB type of events, or even mix and matching, where you get some students, make a team of high school and college students versus a team of high school and college students, and just finding fun ways to combine participants. And I think also, right, we come from a pretty wide variety of institutions and regions, such that the ideological bent of students on a team in Utah might be a little different than the ideological bent of a team in New York or Pennsylvania or wherever. And so it'd be nice to sort of mix some of this up a little bit, just to get exposed even within a team to a variety of perspectives. All right, I've nattered enough. I'm not going to just talk for the sake of talking for 3 more minutes. We'll take a 18-minute break. And then, you know, one thing that's nice about the workshop being digital, it's not that you have to come to every session. So this might be, we might have some new people in the next session, but this is going to be targeted a little bit more at organizing. But definitely, I think it might be interesting, even if you haven't been involved in organizing, to get a look behind the scenes of all that entails. So Mark Doherty will be leading that session in a few minutes. So we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.